The opening of the nearly $6.5 billion bridge, funded entirely by Canada, is under threat tonight. Donald Trump declaring on social media he will try to block the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge.
U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening to block the opening of a new bridge linking Windsor, Ontario, and Detroit, Michigan. It's the Gordie Howe Bridge that's supposed to open later this year.
Well, the U.S. president is once again taking aim at Canada, this time threatening to block the opening of a new major trade corridor between Windsor and Detroit.
A $6.4 billion bridge sits over the Detroit River, built to carry 8,000 trucks a day and connect two of the most integrated economies on Earth. For a moment, it became the front line of a political standoff that reached all the way to the Oval Office. A late-night social media post from Donald Trump threatened to block its opening, claiming the United States was being taken advantage of. By sunrise the next morning, Canada's Prime Minister had responded with a calm, tightly measured message that left Washington scrambling. What followed exposed far more than a disagreement about infrastructure. Canada financed the Gordie Howe International Bridge entirely on its own. The total cost reached roughly $6.4 billion, covering the span itself, customs plazas, highway connections, and supporting infrastructure on both sides of the border. Under a 2012 agreement between Canada and Michigan, the state contributed no construction funding. In exchange, Michigan received joint ownership of the completed bridge. Once Canada recovers its costs through toll revenue, Michigan becomes eligible to collect 50% of the net toll proceeds going forward. The structure of the deal has been public for more than a decade, negotiated openly and signed by Michigan's Republican governor at the time, Rick Snyder. The agreement moved through formal channels in Washington. In 2013, the United States Department of State issued the required presidential permit, allowing construction to proceed. In 2017, Donald Trump and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau released a joint statement describing the bridge as a vital economic link between the two nations. In December 2019, Trump signed legislation that included $15 million in U.S. customs funding for the project. The bridge was not a secret initiative. It was reviewed, endorsed, and funded during Trump's first term. That record made the February 9, 2026 post on Truth Social all the more startling. Trump wrote that Canada owned both sides of the bridge and suggested the United States would need to be compensated before it opened. He pointed to broader trade grievances, including Ontario's ban on American alcohol sales in provincial stores, Canadian dairy protections, and Prime Minister Mark Carney's recent trade agreement with China that reduced Chinese tariffs on Canadian canola from 85% to 15%, while opening an estimated $7 billion in new export opportunities. Washington described that China deal as hostile. The bridge in this framing became leverage. Yet the leverage argument ran into an immediate problem. The ownership structure Trump described did not match the legal reality. Canada does not own both sides of the bridge. Michigan owns half under the 2012 agreement. The United States has not been excluded from compensation. Michigan was granted 50% ownership and future revenue rights without paying for construction. American steel and American workers were used on the Michigan side of the project. These were not obscure details buried in fine print. They were central terms of a public bipartisan agreement. Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens reacted with disbelief. Rick Snyder went further, publishing a column in the Detroit News, correcting the president point by point. Snyder reminded readers that Michigan negotiated the deal to secure long-term economic benefits without upfront cost, and that blocking the bridge would primarily harm American interests. His assessment was blunt. Using this project as leverage made no sense because the pain would fall on Michigan workers, Michigan businesses, and the state's auto industry. To understand why the bridge matters so much, it helps to look at what currently exists. The Ambassador Bridge, built in 1929, has carried commercial traffic between Detroit and Windsor for nearly a century. It is privately owned by the Moran family of Detroit, who acquired it in 1979. Because the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel prohibits commercial trucks, the Ambassador Bridge effectively became a near monopoly for heavy truck traffic across this critical corridor. Every 18-wheeler hauling auto parts, agricultural goods, and manufactured products across the Detroit River has relied on that single crossing. generating more than $60 million annually in toll revenue for decades. When plans for a publicly owned second bridge gained traction, the Moran family opposed them aggressively. They spent roughly $30 million backing a Michigan ballot initiative that would have required statewide voter approval for new international bridge construction. Voters rejected it by about 60%. The family pursued multiple federal lawsuits claiming exclusive rights to any Detroit-Windsor crossing, and lost each case, including an appeal the Supreme Court declined to hear. During Trump's first term, advertisements aired on Fox and Friends urging the president to cancel the project. He did not cancel it. His administration moved forward with funding and regulatory support. That history resurfaced once Trump threatened to block the Gordie Howe Bridge. Snyder's column noted that the Moran family are significant Republican donors and have lobbied against the project for years in Lansing and Washington. If the new bridge were delayed or blocked, the primary beneficiary would not be the United States government or American workers. It would be the existing private owner whose monopoly would remain intact. Snyder wrote that there would be one big winner if the blockade succeeded, and it would not be Canada. The reaction within Michigan was swift and unusually unified. Senator Alyssa Slotkin warned that canceling the project would have serious repercussions for Michigan businesses, supply chains, and consumers who would ultimately face higher costs. Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who had maintained a pragmatic working relationship with Trump, allowed her press secretary Stacey LaRouche to issue a clear statement, emphasizing that the bridge supports jobs, strengthens the auto industry, and represents bipartisan cooperation financed by Canada and built by union workers from both countries. Even Michigan House Speaker Matt Hall, while attempting to defend Trump's posture, acknowledged publicly that the existing bridge is owned by an American family, and suggested those owners could also become targets of retaliation from Canada. The fact that the Moran name surfaced in a press briefing underscored how intertwined economics and politics had become in this dispute. Beyond political maneuvering lies the economic case that drove the bridge's creation in the first place. The Detroit-Windsor corridor handles roughly a quarter of all merchandise trade between Canada and the United States. The integrated North American auto industry depends on components crossing the border multiple times before a finished vehicle rolls off the assembly line. Delays translate into lost productivity and higher costs. The Ambassador Bridge's Canadian approach feeds into Windsor city streets before connecting to highways, forcing trucks to navigate traffic lights and urban congestion. The Gordie Howe Bridge links directly to Ontario Highway 401 and Interstate 75, providing a freeway-to-freeway connection that eliminates those bottlenecks. A University of Windsor study estimated that the new crossing could reduce commercial transit times by up to 20 minutes per trip. Over 30 years, that efficiency could save approximately $2.3 billion for trucking companies and the industries they serve, including American manufacturers and agricultural exporters. Redundancy is another crucial factor. With only one truck capable crossing in the region, any disruption to the Ambassador Bridge creates immediate vulnerability. A structural issue, mechanical failure, or protest blockade can halt heavy commercial traffic entirely. The tunnel cannot absorb that load. The Gordie Howe Bridge provides a second route, strengthening supply chain resilience for both countries. Blocking it would preserve a single point of failure in one of the most important trade corridors on the continent. Against this backdrop, Carney's response stood out for its restraint. The morning after Trump's post, Carney called him directly. The conversation did not evolve into a public shouting match. Carney laid out 4 straightforward facts. Canada financed the bridge. Michigan and Canada share ownership under the 2012 agreement. American and Canadian steel were used in construction, and workers from both nations built it. He then expressed that he looked forward to its opening. Later, speaking to reporters on Parliament Hill, Carney described the bridge as an example of cooperation, highlighted its importance for commerce and tourism, and said he had asked United States Ambassador Pete Hoekstra, a Michigan native, to help maintain constructive dialogue. He even added a light remark about Canada's women's hockey team facing the United States that day, signaling confidence rather than confrontation. The White House followed with a statement calling it unacceptable for Canada to own the bridge fully. That assertion had already been publicly contradicted by Michigan officials, Snyder's column, in the text of the 2012 agreement. Washington appeared to be responding to a version of the arrangement that did not align with the documented facts. There remains a contradiction that has not been fully addressed. In 2017, Trump called the bridge vital. In 2019, he signed customs funding into law. The bridge's ownership structure, financing model, and economic rationale did not change in the years that followed. What changed were trade tensions, Ontario's retaliatory alcohol ban, and Carney's agreement with China. The bridge became entangled in a broader dispute that extended far beyond its concrete towers and steel cables. Snyder framed the issue as one of basic arithmetic. Future toll revenue will flow to the state once Canada recoups its investment. The project creates jobs, reduces transit times, and strengthens supply chains. Blocking it would undermine those benefits while preserving a private monopoly that has operated since 1979. As the opening date approached, construction neared completion. Approximately 6,000 Canadians are expected to cross daily to work in Detroit. Around 8,000 trucks will use the crossing each day, moving goods between two economies that rely on each other in ways that often go unnoticed by the public. The bridge stands as a physical representation of that interdependence. The political drama surrounding it revealed deeper dynamics. A social media threat triggered a fact check from a Republican former governor, a coordinated pushback from Michigan's current leadership, and a calm rebuttal from Canada's prime minister. The episode highlighted how infrastructure, trade policy, and domestic politics can collide in unexpected ways. It also underscored that leverage in international disputes carries consequences that ripple across state lines and industry sectors. In the end, the bridge did not halt construction. It did not become a casualty of tariff disputes or retaliatory bans. The agreement signed in 2012 remains intact. Michigan's ownership stake remains unchanged. The economic case that justified the project continues to stand on the same data and projections that existed years earlier. Canada financed the project, structured a deal that granted Michigan joint ownership, and built a second crossing designed to ease congestion and strengthen resilience. American workers contributed to its construction. American businesses stand to benefit from reduced transit times and increased reliability. The private monopoly that once controlled heavy truck traffic across the Detroit River will face competition it fought for 2 decades to prevent. What began as a social media thread against a $6.4 billion international crossing ended with the same reality that existed before the post went live. A completed bridge built to move commerce more efficiently between two deeply connected economies. Instead of dramatic reversals or emergency decrees, the outcome rested on contracts signed in 2012, permits issued in 2013, federal funding approved in 2019, and a financing model that has been publicly documented for more than a decade. Soon, thousands of commuters will cross between Windsor and Detroit each day. Roughly 8,000 trucks will move through a corridor designed to cut up to 20 minutes off commercial trips. And toll revenues will flow according to a joint ownership agreement. That gives Michigan half of a multi-billion-dollar asset it did not have to finance up front. So, was the bridge ever truly about infrastructure, or was it a convenient pressure point in a wider trade battle? Did the threat strengthen America's negotiating position? Or did it risk undercutting a state whose economy depends on cross-border trade? And when political strategy collides with signed agreements and economic data, which one should ultimately carry more weight? Share thoughts in the comments below. And if this breakdown added context that often gets lost in headlines, support the channel by liking the video so it reaches more people who want substance instead of noise. Subscribe for in-depth fact-driven analysis on the stories shaping economic and political power across borders, and turn on notifications so future episodes do not get missed. See you in the next.